welcome to another edition of Theology Thursday. Today I want to talk about two related subjects that are drawing a distinction I think is important, and it'll help us as we move through life and as we think about the Bible, what we experience, what we find in the Bible. And those are the issues of providence and miracle. So a miracle is something that is outside the normal order. Now we recognize that God's in charge of everything all the time. My heart is beating right now because God is upholding that by His own power. We get that, and we understand that. So there is the regular way that God operates. So God operates through gravity, centrifugal force. God operates through all the bodily systems that He has created and maintains them so that they work and function. And because God is so consistent, doctors and scientists can say, this is how this organ works, and this is how this one functions, and this is what causes things to wear out, and here's how we can fix many of them, because there's a recognition of the regular orderliness of God and the way that He operates in our world. So that's what I mean by the normal order, the natural way that God upholds our universe and our bodies and the earth and all of that. So a miracle is something that happens outside of the norm. So for example, because of the viscosity of water, H2O when it's in a liquid form, and due to surface area and weight and other considerations, a human being is not physically able to walk across the top of water, to walk across a lake. That's outside of the norm. And yet Jesus walked on water. That's a miracle, something that happened outside of the norm. So God does do miracles. We have an axe head that floats when Elisha throws a stick in the water. There are quite a few miracles around Jesus' life, things that are outside the normal order. Dead people don't come back to life, and yet He raised a young boy who was dead and came back to his mom. Elijah did the same thing, and Elisha. But when we look at miracles in the Bible, we know that the miracles fall into three different groupings. Right, let me get my Bible here. So when we look in the Bible, we find that even in the Bible, miracles are not the norm. Miracles are unusual. We have a cluster of miracles around Moses and Joshua, the 10 plagues on Egypt, the crossing the Red Sea, manna, and all that kind of stuff, the walls tumbling in Jericho and all of that. Then we have a long time period with very few miracles, if any, and then we have a whole another cluster of miracles around Elijah and Elisha, and these are found in the second part of 1 Kings and the first part of 2 Kings. And a lot of miracles with these two men. And then hardly any miracles, a smattering few here and there, like with Daniel and a few people, but mostly no miracles, the rest of the Old Testament. And then a bunch of miracles around Jesus and the early days of the apostles. But even the book of Acts, the number of miracles begins to decline as we approach the end of the book of Acts. Because the reality is, miracles are not the norm, or else they would be normal and not miracles. So it's interesting, we have miracles around the law, that would be Moses. We have miracles around the prophets, Elijah and Elisha, who are the first two great kind of prophets that we find in the Bible. And then around Jesus, the apostles. So the law, the prophets, and grace. There will be one more grouping of miracles, and that is at the end of this age, and those will be counterfeit. We find them in the book of Revelation, where we have the beast and the false prophet, and they're doing miracles, and people are swayed by them. And so we find another cluster of miracles there that are counterfeit, conducted by Satan and the false prophet, the Antichrist. So those are miracles. They fall outside of the norm. Here's what's fascinating. There's a fine line between a miracle and God's providence. So here's what I mean by that. There are things that happen that are unique, unusual, both in their timing, location, intensity, but they're not technically miracles. They're not outside the norm. But they're still cool. They're still an example of what God is doing. And one of the places we see those is the 10 plagues on Egypt, where locusts are part of the natural world that God has created. And so there's a locust plague. There's hail that falls from heaven. That's not out of the norm. Fish die and stink, and flies carry disease, then shows up on beasts and humans. So if you move through the miracles in the plagues on Egypt, you discover that most of them are actually natural occurrences, but they begin and end at the command of Moses. They happen in a particular location. Most of them only happen to the Egyptians, not to the Israelites in the land of Goshen, which is a region of Egypt. And we find the intensity is beyond anything that has been experienced before or after. So God not only does miracles, these great, out of the norm, out of the ordinary things, but God also works in providence, location, place, time, pulling things together. Here's how the New Testament puts it in the book of Galatians: in the fullness of time. In the fullness of time. Christ was born of a woman, born under the law. What does it mean in the fullness of time? Meaning that God had orchestrated history, his hand moving in everything, everywhere, to make it the optimum time for Jesus to arrive in our world. I mean, think about it. Jesus arrived in our world when the Roman Empire was over most of the known world at that time, and everyone could communicate in Greek. Regardless of their native language, they could communicate in Greek. So it was easy to spread the gospel throughout the Roman Empire. There was a road system that had been instituted, so the Apostle Paul and others were able to travel safely from city to city as they planted churches and as they took the good news with them. Because it was one big Roman Empire, people were always moving around and doing business and conducting business and trading and those kind of things. And so when they became believers, they would take the message of Jesus with them wherever they went throughout this massive empire. And so it was the right time for Jesus to come. None of that's a miracle, but it's still the work of God. It's his providence. As a matter of fact, in some ways, providence is more amazing than miracles, because providence is God working behind the scenes to pull everything together. Perhaps the best illustration of this is in the book of Esther. Esther is an interesting book in the Bible. It comes right before Job. But the thing that's interesting about Esther is that it is the only book in the Bible that does not mention God. It's the only book in the Bible that has no religious statements really at all. There's one place where Esther says, "Ask the people to fast for me," but that's all. She didn't even use the word prayer. And so it seems like an almost secular book, as though there's no God in it. And that's the point. Because as you read through the story of Esther, you see God at work, putting Mordecai in the right place, putting Esther in the right place at the right time. Matter of fact, her uncle Mordecai would say to Esther, "Perhaps you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this." One of my favorite verses in the Bible. And so the idea is that Esther, the book of Esther, shows us that God works even when we don't see him working directly. And for you and me, the reality is we may never witness a miracle of God. We may never see God do something way beyond the natural order of things that he has created. And yet, we see God at work all the time. All the time. God putting us in the right place, contact with the right person, intervening in people's lives, or we realize, wow, I wasn't there. And that was God at work. We see God at work everywhere. If you're looking for miracles, you're not going to find God often. You're not. That's the nature of a miracle. The fact that it's not the normal. It's unusual and rare. But if you're looking for God providentially, his providential care of the world, God working behind the scenes to accomplish his plan and his purpose, you're going to see God everywhere. So let me see if I can give you an illustration about the difference between a miracle and providence and how both of them bring glory to God. So we have a man going down the road. It's late at night and he is tired. He rolls down the window to let some fresh air in to try to help him stay awake, but he still is tired. And he begins to drift off to sleep. And a bird comes in through the window and hits him in the chest and wakes him up, just in time to not swerve off the road. Now, that's not a miracle. Birds fly. People get tired behind the wheel. People roll down the window. Birds sometimes even fly in a window. But we don't chalk that up to luck or an accident or, man, glad that happened. We say, man, God brought that bird at the right time to fly at the right level on the right paths, come in through the window and hit him. So nothing about it is miraculous. But we see God all over it because of the timing, the location, all those things. Now let's take the same man, same truck, same road. He's just as tired. But this time he doesn't roll down the window. The window is still up. And a bird appears inside the cab of the truck, hits him in the chest, and wakes him up. That's a miracle. Birds don't miraculously suddenly appear inside of a closed vehicle. That's a miracle. Both of those are equally the work of God. With the first one, God's providence, that's the way he usually works. And so we need to always be looking for God at work in his providence as he's bringing together all the things of life and this world and this universe to accomplish his purpose. So, yes, we will, on rare occasions, witness the miraculous. But most of the time, we witness God at work in the regular affairs of life as he pulls them all together to accomplish his plan and his purpose. So I hope this helps you with a little distinction between miracle and providence and where we're looking for, and the great joy in the Christian life of knowing that even when we don't directly see God working, we know he is always working. Perhaps you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. God bless you. Have a fantastic day.